When the wealthy elite came knocking, I finally learned that the husband I had supported for 6 years was actually an amnesiac prince of the Beijing social circle. But the first thing he did after returning home was to throw me out like trash. Standing on the steps, Erick looked down at me coldly. He said he had lost his memory again, completely forgotten me. He was going to get engaged to Gloria, a woman from a similarly prestigious background. Saying I was too lowborn to be worthy of him, Erick's mother tossed a 10 million yuan check at me, ordering me to get out of Erick's life. In my past life, I hadn't realized Erick was only pretending to have amnesia. I had clung to him desperately, refusing to leave, believing that one day he would remember me and our child. But in doing so, I only obstructed his perfect union with Gloria, and in the end, he locked me up in a mental asylum. My own son, ashamed of my lowly origins, forced hallucinogens down my throat, and watched as I struggled in agony until I died. Now that I had been reborn, I wisely accepted the 10 million check. I also demanded that Erick's mother arrange for me to leave the country within 3 days. This time, I chose to live for myself. Chapter 1. Hearing my words. Erick's mother frowned in disgust. Erick lost his memory for a month and you still wouldn't leave. I thought you actually loved him. Turns out, you're just a pauper putting on a show to grab some money. Everyone knew how madly I had loved Erick, even when he had completely forgotten me. I clung desperately to the idea of marrying him, but in my past life, it wasn't until I was poisoned to death in that asylum that I realized the truth. Erick's 2 memory losses were both lies. The first time, he used me to save himself. The second time, he just wanted to cast me aside and officially be with his childhood sweetheart, Gloria. Later, when I became an obstacle between them, he simply locked me up in a mental institution and had me drugged to death. I didn't bother explaining. I simply said to Erick's mother in a calm voice, "I'll leave in 3 days." There's no need to tell Erick. In my previous life, Erick said I was the stain of his existence. And now that I was being erased, it should happen quietly. Erick's mother snorted coldly, warning me that I must disappear from Erick's world as scheduled. After finalizing the arrangement with her, I opened my laptop and began preparing my application materials for University College London, UCL. After I found Erick, I dropped out of university to take care of him and our son, moving back to my small hometown to open a restaurant and save money. Back then, Erick pretended to have amnesia, and all the financial burdens and responsibilities fell on me. I worked 20 hours a day without rest, but when I finally brought him back to his family, he complained about the smell of cooking oil on me, installing 30 air purifiers in the house just to get rid of it. In front of everyone, he ridiculed me. "Women like you, country bumpkins, even the air around you is filthy." He even forbade me from eating at the same table, making me dine alone in the kitchen. Now that I had been given a second chance, I would never give up my life for anyone again. Chapter 2. When I had just bought my plane ticket to England, Erick returned. The moment he walked in and didn't see me carrying out hangover soup to greet him, he immediately barked angrily, "Julia, why didn't you make us some hangover soup?" As naturally as if he were ordering around a maid. Erick had just come back from a business banquet, reeking of alcohol. In his arms was Gloria, and trailing behind them, our son, Oscar. This banquet, in my past life, was originally meant for me to attend. I had cried my eyes out, questioning Erick. He had only sneered impatiently and mocked, "Julia, everyone brings a proper lady to these events. You want me to show up with a lowly maid like you and embarrass myself? Other than being Oscar's biological mother, you have nothing to do with me. Know your place. Don't overstep again." So this time, I ignored all 3 of them, and continued to gather my things to head upstairs. But Erick noticed the English interface on my computer. He reached out, blocking me vaguely, and asked with a trace of mockery, "What are you looking at? You, a rural illiterate, can even understand English?" I couldn't be bothered to respond. In silence, I prepared to leave, but Gloria blocked my way. Smiling sweetly, I had to block so much wine for Erick tonight. My head is spinning. I'm craving some mango crepe cake. "Julia, Could you make it for me? Pretty please? In my previous life, Erick locked me up in a mental institution. He had custom-made chains crafted for me, so that I couldn't even get out of bed on my own. Even going to the bathroom required pressing a call button for help. Gloria once came to visit me with an art knife in hand. She stepped on my palm with the thin heels of her stilettos, grinding mercilessly, ripping open flesh and blood. She took pleasure in my hoarse cries for help, knowing I couldn't struggle because of the chains. In the end, she carved the word vile into my arm, laughing wildly. Later, when Erick found out, he merely chuckled and said, "Gloria really has good taste. It fits you perfectly." Now, staring at the matching rings on her finger and Erick's, something shattered inside me. I said coldly, "I'm allergic to mango. Order delivery yourself." Erick, impatient, flew into a rage. As if standing up for her, he grabbed my wrist roughly and shoved me to the ground. "Julia, stop pretending. Whatever Gloria tells you to do, you do it. She's my future wife. Don't forget, you're nothing but a burden living off the Erick family. You should be grateful just to serve as a maid." My head slammed against the cabinet. The dizzying pain made my vision spin, but the ache in my chest spread even deeper. In my past life, back in our small town, there had been a birthday when Erick bought me a mango cake. After eating it, I suffered a severe allergic reaction, my whole body swelling up. Erick, panicked, had carried me on his back for 2 hours, to the county hospital. After that, he swore he would never let mangoes appear before me again, or else he'd punish himself by never marrying me. Now, he pretended to have lost his memory, but his oath had come true. Our fate had completely unraveled. Obsessed with his childhood sweetheart Gloria, he had erased 6 years of shared love without a second thought. "You're evil. You're a bad woman bullying Gloria," came a sharp cry. Suddenly, a stabbing pain shot through my calf. Looking down, I saw it was Oscar. He had somehow found a fork and was gouging at my leg with it. The skin split open quickly, blood beading and trickling down. Oscar, thrilled at having hurt me, stabbed even harder. "Bad woman. How dare you hurt Gloria? I'm punishing you." Gloria let out a delighted laugh, praising Oscar as her brave little knight. Meanwhile, Erick watched my painful expression closely, smiling with satisfaction. Once, I was too reluctant to leave, but now, I felt the last shred of affection I held for Oscar shatter completely with his violent actions. This was the child I had fought to give birth to, in a small town hospital, without anesthesia, after 9 grueling hours of labor. In my previous life, after he grew up, he despised my humble origins, and personally forced hallucinogens down my throat, watching as I struggled and died in agony. And now, for the sake of a third party, a woman who was practically a stranger, he casually hurt me without hesitation. It wasn't until all 3 of them, Erick, Gloria, and Oscar, finished venting their frustrations on me, that they finally returned to the master bedroom together. A man and a woman, close and affectionate, and a child nestled tightly between them. Only I stood alone, in the empty, desolate living room. Like an outsider, a forgotten maid, I endured the pain, simply wrapped my wounds, and spent the night quietly packing for my flight to England. There wasn't much to bring, besides a few pieces of clothing. I had nothing else worth taking. That was what 6 years with Erick had left me. Chapter 3. 2 days before my departure, I went to the bank to handle foreign exchange procedures for studying abroad. As I stepped out of the bank, a person in a mascot costume from a nearby mall blocked my way. Seeing my confusion, he removed his headgear. It was Diego, my old neighbor from when I lived in the small town. "Julia, long time no see. When did you come back?" he said warmly. I was an orphan. It was only because of Erick that I once had a home and a child. Back then, I gave up everything and left my hometown for him, a decision that ended in betrayal. Hearing Diego's concern, I forced a smile. "I won't be going back." Diego laughed and said, "I used to think maybe I'd have a chance to win you over. But then 6 years ago you picked up Erick and brought him home. But now, Seeing that you married well after all. I'm happy for you. Come on, let me treat you to a meal, he said. Then he ran to ask his manager for leave, even though he earned only 100 yuan a day, dressed as a mall mascot. He insisted on taking me to a restaurant where meals cost 500 yuan. Saying he didn't know when we might meet again, I couldn't bear to refuse. Next to the restaurant was the most luxurious bridal shop in the city. Once, Erick had promised me he would take me to pick out the best wedding dress. Hold a wedding of the century. In the end, none of it ever happened. As we passed by, I glanced inside casually, only to freeze. Inside were Erick and Gloria, with Oscar trailing behind them. I stood stunned. Erick also noticed me and Diego, without a word. He charged out and punched Diego in the face. Then he turned and cursed at me. Julia! You're so shameless, messing around like this. Even this trash is good enough for you? Yeah, right. A broke country woman like you is only good enough for trash like him. Erick, you're insane. I quickly helped Diego up and shielded him behind me. Diego looked just as stunned. He couldn't believe that the Erick who once loved me so deeply would now insult me so viciously. My eyes burned, but I stared dead on at Erick and Gloria, both dressed in their wedding attire, and asked through gritted teeth, "And what about you two? Is this some kind of game? Should I bring a wedding gift to your little party?" Erick froze for a second, not expecting me to fight back, but soon he roared at me, full of righteous indignation. "It's your fault for being such an embarrassment. Oscar deserves a beautiful, graceful mother. Gloria is only doing this, posing for wedding photos, to fulfill Oscar's wish. Don't think everyone is as cheap and shameless as you." Oscar tugged tightly on Gloria's dress, nodding eagerly. "You're ugly. You're not my mom. Get out of our lives. I want Gloria to be my mom." Gloria smiled smugly, mocking, "Julia, dear, women should know when to step aside gracefully. Maybe it's time you considered some cosmetic surgery." I clenched my fists, my nails digging deep into my palms. But I felt no pain. "Erick," I said coldly, taking a deep breath, "who do you think you are, other than being Oscar's biological father? You are nothing to me. You have no right to interfere in my life. You three can put on whatever pathetic show you want. Just stay out of my sight. And as for Gloria, enjoy your second-hand goods. You deserve each other." Without another word, I helped Diego up and walked away without looking back. Behind me, I could hear Erick's furious roar and Gloria's fake attempts to calm him down fading into the distance. Diego tried to comfort me softly. "Julia, don't listen to them. You're the best." Back in the small town, everyone thought so too, even though I was an orphan. I had no shortage of marriage proposals, but next to Erick, I was treated like garbage. Something disgusting to even look at. In this new life, I would never let him hurt me again. Chapter 4. After taking Diego to the hospital and making sure he was treated properly, I returned home. For the first time in a long while, I found Erick sitting on the sofa, holding a wedding dress in his arms, as if waiting for me. The moment I walked in, his cold expression softened. He lifted the dress and approached me gently. "Today I lost my temper. I'm sorry. I picked out this dress especially for you. We can take a family portrait with Oscar and hang it right there," he said, pointing proudly at the center wall of the living room. He acted like he was really offering me a future as the lady of the house, but I immediately recognized it. It was the same dress Gloria had worn earlier today. She had rejected it. Now Erick was offering it to me, second-hand, discarded, as if I were just some village bumpkin unworthy of better. I didn't expose him. I only asked calmly, "When?" Seeing me gently stroking the dress, Erick mistook it for acceptance. "Tomorrow," he said, "one day before my flight." I smiled faintly and nodded. Just one last souvenir, a final memory between me and the boy I once called my son. After this farewell, we would never cross paths again. Chapter 5. During the wedding photo shoot, there was a rare moment of warmth. Oscar, who had always disliked me, looked at me after I finished my hair and makeup, and snorted, "You're not as pretty as Gloria. But you look okay, I guess." Erick lightly tapped his head, then lifted him up to pose for a family photo with me. If this had been in my past life, those words would have made me secretly happy for days. But now, I felt nothing, since deciding to erase them from my life. Neither Oscar nor Erick could touch me anymore, nor could they influence my emotions. Just as the photographer finished adjusting our pose, and was about to press the shutter button, Erick's sharp ringtone rang out. It was the special ringtone he had set for Gloria. He immediately halted the shoot, and answered the call. From the other end, a panicked woman's voice cried out, "Erick, help me! There are 3 men bothering me. I'm so scared. Come quickly!" Erick's face changed instantly. "Don't be afraid, Gloria. I'm coming right now." Without a single word of explanation, he bolted out the door. Oscar, recognizing Gloria's voice, shouted anxiously, "I'm going too! I have to protect Gloria." Father and son vanished from the studio in a flash. The photographer awkwardly turned to me and asked, "Miss, would you like to wait for them to continue the shoot?" The heart that had only just regained a bit of warmth was once again crushed, leaving only bitter emptiness. I gave a self-deprecating smile and returned the wedding dress. After all, it wasn't even a style I liked, since all the supporting characters in my life had left. I would simply stand alone as the lead actress. I chose a sleek business outfit, the kind popular among women in the Greater Bay Area, and asked the photographer to take a professional solo portrait. I also took the opportunity to update my passport photo, preparing myself for my new life abroad. Sure enough, after the shoot ended, I saw Gloria's latest post on social media. It was a picture, Oscar lying sweetly in her arms, calling her mommy, with Erick, still in the same suit he had worn while standing beside me, at her side. As for the so-called bar harassment, it turned out to be nothing but a joke. Gloria had drawn a dare in a party game, requiring her to call the person closest to her and ask for rescue, and Erick, without hesitation, abandoned me for her. Fitting, really. It was the last day I would ever exist in Erick's world. Chapter 6. Late at night, when Erick returned home, he still reeked of Gloria's perfume. Oscar was already sound asleep when Erick saw me. His voice was, for once, unusually gentle. "Gloria ran into a little trouble at a bar. I just went over to help her. It was nothing serious." I nodded, pretending to believe him. His lies were never sophisticated, because I wasn't even worth lying to. "Go give Oscar a bath," Erick ordered casually, as if instructing a maid. Without a word, I walked to the sofa and carefully picked up Oscar. I gently began to remove his jacket, preparing to take him to the bathroom, but just as I undid the first button, he woke up. Oscar opened his eyes groggily. The moment he saw me, his face twisted in disgust. He shoved my hands away roughly. "I don't want you. Go away. I want Gloria." I froze before I could react. He kicked me hard in the leg, the very leg still wrapped in gauze, covering the wounds he himself had carved into me with a fork 2 days ago. The pain was unbearable. My knee buckled. "Get away. You're disgusting. Don't touch me." His shrill voice, full of hatred and revulsion, stabbed into me like a knife. Hearing the commotion, Erick scolded him. "Oscar, how can you treat your mother like that?" But Oscar cried, red-faced, and screamed, "She's not my mom. Gloria is my mom." I staggered back, my leg throbbing. Erick walked past me without even glancing my way, as if I were no more than a servant in his house. He frowned slightly at the crying Oscar. Then, with a weary sigh that felt forced, he dialed a video call to Gloria, as if he had done it countless times before. Even his faint show of helplessness was an act, a flimsy performance to appease me, the so-called biological mother. "Gloria, Oscar misses you. Talk to him, will you?" Erick's voice softened, becoming so gentle, as if Gloria were the true mistress of his heart. The call connected, and Gloria's sweet, sugary face appeared on the screen. She spoke in a syrupy voice. Oscar, what's wrong, darling? Missing your big sister? Oscar immediately threw himself toward the phone, his face crumpling in sadness, as if my touch had somehow contaminated him. Gloria, I missed you. I won a model prize at kindergarten yesterday. I want to save it for you. When are you coming over? Gloria laughed softly. I'll come see you tomorrow, okay? Be a good boy until then. Oscar nodded fiercely, his face lighting up with happiness, as he chatted excitedly with her. But to me, he offered nothing but cold stares, mockery, and contempt. Watching this scene, I felt the last fragile piece of warmth rot away inside me. Without a word, I turned and walked into the bedroom, closing the door behind me, shutting out the sounds of their false joy. I pulled out my phone. I reconfirmed my airport pickup time in England, and the address of my new home. Everything was ready. Only tomorrow's flight remained. Later that night, Erick pulled me into his arms, murmuring, Oscar's just a kid. He doesn't know better. Don't be mad. He held me tightly, clutching as if desperate to grasp onto something. I resisted the nausea rising inside me, said nothing, closed my eyes, and pretended to be asleep, listening to Erick's even breathing. I silently began counting down the hours. Tomorrow, everything would end. Chapter 7. My flight was early in the morning. The car was arranged by Erick's mother. After answering a call from the driver, Erick grabbed my wrist. His eyes filled with faint unease. Why are you going to the airport? He demanded. I explained calmly. Mom asked me to pick someone up, a very important friend. Hearing this, the alertness on Erick's face disappeared at once, because in the Erick family, I had always been a secretary, an assistant, and a maid, nothing more. Erick frowned in disgust and reminded me, remember to act properly. Don't embarrass me by looking like some bumpkin fresh out of the countryside. Seeing my indifferent expression, he quickly changed the subject. I'll arrange a nice place for you two to have lunch. I refused flatly. Mom has already booked it. Suddenly, Erick wrapped his arms tightly around me from behind, holding me so tightly it hurt. I ordered a new wedding dress. He whispered, in a few days, we'll take new wedding photos. I also reserved a haute couture gown for you to wear at the ceremony. Suppressing the nausea rising inside me, I forced out a soft, okay. Then, I wrenched myself free from his embrace. He looked at me in surprise. I hurriedly added, I have to go. The driver is waiting. I'll wait for you to come back, he said. Minutes later, I passed through security. As I turned back briefly, I saw him, his face filled with shock, rushing toward me. Maybe he really had fallen for me again, but it was too late. The time was too late. The love was too late. At 8:20 a.m., I boarded my flight to England, and Erick became nothing more than background noise in my life. Chapter 8. 7 years later, I walked out of Beijing airport and caught a cab to the CBD. After going abroad, I resumed my studies, passed the IELTS exam, and pursued a master's degree in human resources management at one of the UK's top universities. By a stroke of luck, my professor recommended me for an internship at FMC, a prestigious international headhunting firm. After graduation, I continued working at the company, steadily climbing the ranks, honing my skills step by step. At the company's headquarters in the UK, I earned the recognition and respect of all my colleagues. And now, I had been appointed by the chairman to return to China as the general manager for the China region, setting up a new office and preparing to establish a full branch. I was granted company shares, meaning future profits would be partially mine to share. All the darkness of my past life had finally turned into a brilliant sunrise. After cutting ties with Erick and the others, I had blazed forward on the right path of my life. Free and unrestrained, a WeChat notification sounded. It was from Nestor. Have you landed yet? The studio renovation is done. We can start selecting office equipment and furnishings now. I couldn't come pick you up, But you'll see the finished studio when you arrive. Waiting for you. I replied with a simple got it. Nestor was a client I had once headhunted from the new energy sector in the UK. It had taken nearly 2 relentless weeks of negotiations to secure him. After 5 colleagues had already declared, he was impossible to poach. But in the end, I succeeded. Upon hearing that I was returning to China, this new energy specialist, despite our fields being unrelated, insisted on partnering with me to establish the studio. He jokingly claimed it was an investment in your ability to make money. Since then, he had kept calling me Boss Julia with a teasing tone. The elevator dinged on the 19th floor. Nestor's tall, lean figure was waiting just outside, a broad smile tugging at his lips. Long time no see, Julia, he greeted warmly. Welcome to your studio. Before I could even approach and reply, a strong, familiar hand grabbed me roughly, pulling me aside. Then came an unmistakable voice, one I hadn't heard in years but knew all too well. Julia, it's really you. You finally came back. I looked up and met the cold, sharp features of Erick. Chapter 9. 7 years ago. As soon as I got off the plane, I saw countless missed calls and endless messages from him. At first, they were full of arrogance and impatience, scolding me for missing the wedding photo shoot, for being immature. Later, when he realized he couldn't reach me no matter what, they turned into panic. Erick had never truly cared about my life. In his mind, my world should revolve solely around him and Oscar. Naturally, he didn't have any other way to contact me. He thought a simple command would summon me at any time. Most of the time, I had eagerly approached him myself, asking what he needed, seeking any scrap of his approval. And what did I get in return? Being locked in a mental institution, being force-fed hallucinogens, and Gloria carving the word vile into my arm. I couldn't even bother to finish reading his messages. I simply replied with one word, goodbye. Then, while the phone rang furiously, I yanked out the SIM card and threw it away. His mother would cover for me. Erick had never truly known me, and because of that, I lived peacefully for 7 years. Before I could shove Erick away, Nestor had already stepped forward, his face cold, prying Erick's hand off me. Mr. Erick, please have some self-respect. But Erick acted like he couldn't understand human language. He lunged at me again, only to be pushed back firmly by Nestor. Why did you leave without a word? Erick shouted, his voice raw. Do you know how long I searched for you? How dare you just disappear for 7 years? But not long after I left, I heard the news. In Beijing's high society, he had quickly married his childhood sweetheart, Gloria. Their wedding had been the envy of everyone. Erick stared at me, desperate, rambling. Julia, you said you're setting up a studio, right? I heard it. I'll hire the best renovation team for you. I'll call them right now. This location isn't good enough. Use my office building in the North District. I won't charge you any rent. Watching him lose control, I finally spoke the first words since our reunion, fighting back the disgust. I don't need it. We're not even business partners. The studio's renovation has been completely arranged. Erick's expression twisted, but he forced a strained smile. It's okay, Julia. There are other ways I can help. I'll have our top HR team support you. You won't need to recruit anyone. Our company has finance, legal, technical departments. You can use any of them freely. The way he kept self-importantly making decisions for me finally wore out my patience. I interrupted coldly. Erick, are you insane? My business has nothing to do with you. I don't need your interference. The further you stay from me, the better. Hearing the finality in my voice, Nestor turned to glance at me. Without hesitation, he stretched out his arm, shielding me from Erick. Since Julia has made herself perfectly clear, Nestor said calmly, Erick, get lost. Otherwise, we'll have to call security. With that, Nestor protected me as we stepped into the elevator. Julia, no. Please listen to me, Erick shouted behind us. The false calm he had worn on his face shattered completely, replaced by stark panic. As the elevator descended, his figure vanished from my view, completely. Chapter 10. The next day, I had a meeting with my colleagues at the studio, finalizing our first project after opening. This time, we're recruiting senior management for the multinational tech company Xiongyi. This is the project report I've already finalized. Please review it. Tomorrow we'll start pushing forward with the progress. And tonight I'm meeting the client for a detailed discussion. The room was dead silent. Only the sound of my steady and powerful voice filling the air. All eyes were on me. As the meeting ended, my assistant looked at me with wide, adoring eyes. Boss, this deal is a done deal. 3 years ago, in the UK, you recruited half the management team for ICM in just one go. Every year, they invite you to their annual meetings to thank you personally. I've heard of your reputation even in the domestic headhunting industry. Everyone knows you. How lucky am I to be working with you? I'll always work for you. Before I could make a joke, a tall figure walked into the meeting room. It was Erick, holding a large bouquet of deep red roses, trying to appear considerate. He spoke gently. I waited until the meeting ended to come in. Julia, I ordered this specially for you. I hope you like it. I've booked a restaurant downstairs in your office building. Let's go have dinner together. Erick's voice held a hint of expectation, along with an undeniable confidence. As though there were no barriers between us, my colleagues immediately fell silent, then quickly dispersed. I'd been with Erick for 6 years, but he had never once bought me flowers. I guessed it was because he didn't think I was worthy. In my previous life, on Gloria's birthday, she had a piano recital. Erick had rented the most luxurious estate in Beijing, imported 500,000 exquisite Ecuadorian roses, and set up a grand birthday banquet for her. That was the first time I had ever heard of Ecuadorian roses. I frowned, coldly replying, Erick, there's nothing left for us to discuss. Don't say that. Julia. Erick's tone softened, but he still spoke with the same sense of entitlement, as though with a simple gesture, I would eagerly fall into his arms, completely losing my dignity. I know I've done some things wrong. Give me a chance, okay? I still remember when you ran that small restaurant. You used to say you didn't want to work so hard and dreamed of opening a flower shop instead. I can make that dream come true. I'll pay to open a flower shop for you. We'll have fresh flowers flown in every day from Ecuador and Holland. How does that sound? As he spoke, Erick forced the bouquet into my hands, but it didn't stay there for more than 2 seconds. I didn't even look at the flowers. I immediately tossed them into the nearby trash can. The only thing I felt was disgust, not a single trace of emotion. Erick, you can keep your flowers for Gloria. Seeing me throw the flowers away, Erick's confident expression froze. His face flushed with anger, and he was about to retort, but was interrupted by a voice coming from the door. If this is how you're trying to win her back, then you're really pathetic. All you're good for is marriage alliances, and dying alone. It was Nestor, stepping up beside me, looking at Erick with a hint of mockery. Nestor, who was 5 centimeters taller than Erick, slightly lowered his head, his gaze full of disdain. After saying that, he turned to me, leaning in affectionately. I came to pick you up from work. Let's go have hot pot at my place. I brought back the authentic seasoning from Sichuan. You haven't had it in years while in the UK. I nodded in satisfaction. And at this, Erick's face grew even darker. He clenched his fists, his voice shaking with suppressed anger. Julia, is it because of this man that you won't come back with me? Before I could respond, Nestor's voice came again from behind me. Mr. Erick, Julia's refusal to return with you has nothing to do with me. It's because you're a terrible man, unworthy of her. Julia is now the general manager of FMC China, appointed personally by the chairman of FMC. You just want her to waste her talent in a 10-square-meter flower shop? Your love really isn't much to speak of. Erick's face twisted with fury, and he glared at Nestor with hostility. Suddenly, he lunged forward, grabbing Nestor's collar, and shouting at the top of his lungs, "What are you? Julia and I have a child. He's 10 years old now. Julia, have you forgotten Oscar?" I looked into his eyes, Filled with so much expectation, a wave of disgust washed over me. And I put my phone down. Meeting room. Now. Just as Erick was about to strike Nestor, I immediately contacted security. The security team arrived swiftly. Restraining Erick and making sure he couldn't move, I stood before him, looking down at his face as he looked up at me, coldly questioning him. Earlier, you said you had forgotten everything, so the life we had in that small town doesn't matter? You wanted to continue with Gloria, but now, you can suddenly remember the promises you made? How laughable. A medical miracle? The truth about his fake memory loss was exposed. Erick's face went pale in shock. His expression frantic. His lips moving but unable to form a coherent word. Julia. I really know I was wrong. I ignored his shameful silence. Too tired to respond, I simply took Nestor's hand and walked away. Chapter 11. Scum like Erick stick to you like an old band-aid. And now he's dragging Gloria along with him. I don't know how she found out I was back in the country, but she stormed over, acting like the legitimate wife confronting the mistress. Behind her stood Oscar, now 12 years old, already over 5 feet 7 inches. Julia. How dare you come back? She spat. Erick is my husband now. You'd better stay out of this. Don't even dream of anything. Oscar, annoyed, clicked his tongue at her, then elbowed Gloria. I calmly called security, responding without warmth. Someone like Erick is perfect for you. No one else will ever look at him. And the same goes for you. Gloria sneered, her once delicate and beautiful features now ravaged by the 7 years of marriage that had quickly aged her. Who do you think you are? A country bumpkin, kicked out by Erick's family. And now you're here trying to play pretend? Oscar suddenly spoke, mocking Gloria with a look of disgust on his face. Enough. Shut up. And what about you? A madwoman stuck in an empty house. That expression, I recognized it all too well. The same one Gloria had worn 7 years ago when she said the same to me. Gloria, now with her tail stepped on, immediately scratched Oscar's forearm with her long nails. Screaming and crying, she whined about how hard it had been to take care of him all these years, and how hard her life had been, and so on. But her noise was disrupting the office order in the studio. At that moment, security arrived, and I gave them a glance. I spoke impatiently. Both of them. Out. They're not allowed in the studio without my permission. Oscar, with his face flushed in anger, shoved security's hand away, walked up to me, and ordered arrogantly, "Come home with me. I've hired a 5-star chef to welcome you." Chapter 12. Looking at Oscar's face, which bore a striking resemblance to Erick's, I couldn't help but marvel at how much his confidence mirrored his father's. 7 years had passed, but Oscar still believed that he held a unique place in my heart. What he didn't realize was that he was hated, despised, and insulted by his own flesh and blood. He was the one who had personally forced me to ingest hallucinogens, leading to my death. In his eyes, he was killing me slowly, destroying the very bond that should have been unbreakable between mother and child. I didn't give him a single glance, and simply rejected him with a firm no. Then, I had someone contact Erick to take his wife away. I also ordered security to ensure that this family would never be allowed into the studio again, and that if they came near, they would be immediately escorted out. Oscar stood frozen, his face full of disbelief. It seemed like he was finally realizing that I had completely given up on him and his father. And panic set in. He even spoke out, calling me Mom. Erick, witnessing this, scolded me for being heartless, attempting to emotionally manipulate me with his words. His voice mixed with anger, disappointment, and even a hint of unspoken desperation. Julia, in just 7 years, you've changed so much. Do we no longer matter to you? Do you really not know how much we've missed you? How much we've sacrificed for you? The old heart fades, but the former one changed first. I responded with a face like stone, nodding lightly. It doesn't matter at all. And right now, we're discussing a $7 million project. If you keep interfering with our work, I'll consider calling the police. In the end, Erick, with a face as pale as death, took his family and left. I sighed in relief. Chapter 13. On the weekend, Nestor and I took his niece, Jessica, to the amusement park. As we were waiting in line for the carousel, a familiar voice suddenly reached my ears. I looked up, and to my surprise, it was Erick, Oscar, and Gloria. The three of them stood together, but there was an undeniable distance between them. It didn't look at all like the happy family I had known before I died in my past life. When Jessica tightly held onto me, Oscar's face tightened in an instant, his expression filled with unease. For some reason, my presence seemed to upset him. Gloria immediately spoke sharply. So, you're bringing your and Nestor's child to the amusement park now? You'd better stay away from my husband and my son. I frowned. But before I could speak, Nestor responded coldly. Gloria, watch your words. This is my sister's daughter. Julia is not someone you can easily slander. Gloria sneered, clearly not believing him. But she was about to speak again, when Oscar suddenly broke free from her grip and walked directly up to me. His gaze was complex, with a hint of pleading. And then, to my shock, he dropped to his knees in front of me. Mom, please come back. I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. His voice trembled, his eyes red, as if he were performing a tragic act. This scene drew curious glances from the surrounding visitors, and many started whispering among themselves. Erick stepped forward, urgently speaking. Julia, if you're willing to come back, I'll divorce Gloria right now. We can start over as a family, okay? Gloria immediately screamed in protest. Erick, what do you mean by this? You begged me to marry you. Now you want to abandon me for her? Shut up, Erick snapped. If it weren't for your tricks, I wouldn't have ended up like this with Julia. The two began to argue fiercely, their words sharp, and the scene became chaotic. Oscar remained kneeling on the ground, looking up at me, his red eyes filled with hope and pleading. In my previous life, I had waited until my death for the apology I never received from him. But now, it was too late. No apology could ever heal those wounds. No matter how many times it came, the harm and betrayal from the past had long since erased any feelings I had for them. I crouched down, calmly speaking to Oscar. Oscar, you don't need to do this. I have no relationship with you or your father anymore. Your life is your own choice. So don't try to manipulate me with guilt anymore. After speaking, I stood up, took Jessica's hand, and said to Nestor, let's go. We'll find another amusement park. While Jessica went to play bumper cars, Nestor and I sat on a bench to rest. Nestor remained silent for a while, occasionally glancing at me with affection, like a loyal dog who wasn't spoiled but understood. Are you okay? He asked softly, curious but hesitant, fearing I might reject or abandon him. So, I briefly told him about my past with Erick. So, Oscar is really your and Erick's child? Nestor asked, his voice filled with understanding. I nodded, my tone tinged with bitterness. Yes, but he's been raised by Gloria since he was young, and has always harbored hostility toward me. I tried to make amends with him, but he chose to stand by Gloria. Now, I no longer need them. Nestor leaned in, wrapped his arms tightly around me, and his voice was firm. Julia, you're the most exceptional and resilient woman I've ever met. You deserve a better life. I may not have been there in the past, but I'll always be here for you from now on. As for Oscar, he came to the studio to visit me a few more times, trying to apologize and win me back, but I never allowed security to let him in. All the harm done could never be undone, and the bond between Oscar and me had been severed long ago. Chapter 14. Recently, the news of Erick and Gloria's divorce had been making waves in the Beijing social circle, but no one knew the real reason behind this rich, devoted young man's change of heart. Not until Erick came to me. It turns out that he had finally uncovered the truth about the car accident from years ago, the accident that sent him crashing off the winding mountain road, which also entangled my fate with Erick's from that point onward, had been orchestrated by Gloria herself. With a sincere expression on his face, Erick knelt before me, holding a dazzling diamond ring that he must have purchased at an exorbitant price, and earnestly pleaded, "Julia, I've been deceived by Gloria all this time. Now that I know the truth, I'll completely cut ties with her. There will be no third party between us anymore. Let's start fresh. Give me a chance, and I'll make it up to you." Nestor, who had come to the studio to find me, stood frozen when he saw the scene. He looked at me uneasily, afraid I might agree. But seeing Erick kneeling before me, I coldly sneered, "Uninterested? Just because you uncovered the truth, does that mean I'm supposed to be moved and take you back? I'm not some object you can discard when convenient and then pick back up when you feel like it. And I'm not some pitiful creature waiting for you forever." Then, with a smile on my face, I lifted my hand, intertwined with Nestor's, and waved it at Erick. "Let me introduce you, Nestor, my boyfriend. He treats me well, and I cherish him. Please, leave now." Nestor's smile was uncontrollable as he naturally put his arm around my shoulder. His tone warm but firm. "Sir, Julia is now my girlfriend. Please don't disturb her anymore." Erick's eyes widened, and in a fit of rage, he shouted, "Impossible! Julia, you must have been deceived by him. He's just taking advantage of you." Chapter 15. That night, Erick sent me a photo. His wrist was covered in blood, with the caption, "Julia, I can't live without you. If you don't come back, I won't be able to go on." The memory loss was a lie, but I couldn't control my love for you. I was just too young and foolish back then. "Can you forgive me?" Looking at the photo, I couldn't help but laugh. I replied with a message, "Erick, do you believe in past lives and present ones? In the last life, you destroyed me with your own hands, and your life has been just fine without me. A privileged child, wealthy, and happy." Erick obviously didn't understand my meaning. He called, his voice hoarse, "Julia, what are you talking about? What past life? What nonsense are you saying? If you want to reject me, there's no need for such excuses." I hung up the phone, not bothering to reply, but Erick, seemingly unstable, went wild, repeatedly hurting himself. He kept sending me photos and videos, showing horrifying amounts of blood filling the bathroom, accompanied by desperate pleas, begging as if he were the one who had always loved but never been loved. I had someone contact Erick's mother, then blocked Erick's number. 1 week later, I heard that Erick had been sent to the emergency room. His condition was critical. His company also faced issues due to his emotional breakdown, and their stock price plummeted. Erick's mother, accompanied by Oscar, came to me, her face haggard with worry, begging, "Julia, Erick knows he was wrong. He really needs you now. Could you go visit him at the hospital? Even if it's just to see him once. He refuses treatment completely." Oscar stood by, crying with snot running down his face, his voice trembling. "Mom, I know I was wrong. Can you forgive me? Forgive Dad, and let our family be together again." I shook my head, my tone firm. "My relationship with Erick has long been over. It's not my responsibility if he refuses treatment. As for you, Oscar, I don't need your apology, and I won't be turning back." Chapter 16. After that day, Oscar, in despair, chose to jump off a building and commit suicide. Before he died, he stabbed Gloria's arm with a knife while she was asleep, as if it were his final act of revenge. This confirmed the mark Gloria had once carved into my arm in my past life, the word slut. Old grudges, entwined and returned. Gloria was sent to the hospital, and Erick, upon learning everything, completely broke down. He blamed Oscar's death on Gloria, and, in a fit of rage, sneaked into Gloria's hospital room, attempting to kill her with a surgical knife. Gloria was gravely injured, and Erick was sentenced to life imprisonment for attempted murder. A few years later, he died in prison, consumed by depression. Eventually, he legally divorced Gloria, and left all his assets to me. When Erick's mother came to handle his affairs, she found me, full of regret. "Julia, if only Erick had cherished you back then, maybe none of this would have happened." 7 years ago, I shouldn't have agreed to let you go, I calmly replied. Aunt, there are no ifs in life. Every decision I've made, I have no regrets about. I'm not obligated to sacrifice my life for the sake of others. I donated all of Erick's inheritance to charity for the education of girls in rural areas. I was never meant to belong to him. And now, I've finally broken free from the fate tied to him. Two life paths can never cross again. Chapter 17. I continued as the general manager of FMC China. And my career flourished. Nestor also shifted his entire business focus back to China. 2 years later, we decided to get married. And adopted a child. Starting a brand new life. Nestor held my hand, gently speaking, Julia. Thank you for letting me into your life. I smiled back at him. The road ahead was still long, and this time, I had finally found true happiness.